Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum dan selamat petang kepada yang bahagia Datuk, Datin, Prof, Prof Madia, Doktor, tuan-tuan dan puan-puan semua. Pertamanya, saya Zamrin bin Salim daripada bahagian standard MQA selaku pengurusi pada webinar pada petang ini. Saya juga ingin mengucapkan selamat datanglah khususnya kepada speaker kita dan juga kepada semua para peserta ke webinar kajian semula program standard pengajian perniagaan. Untuk makluman semua, program standard ini adalah edisi kedua yang diterbitkan pada Ogos 2021. Ia adalah rentetan daripada terbitan edisi pertama pada Mac 2015. Terdapat beberapa perubahan dari segi hasil pembelajaran, penilaian pelajar, BOK khususnya dan lain-lain lagi yang akan dibentangkan oleh panel pembangun standard pada petang ini. Pada hari ini, kami amat berbesar hati kerana dua orang panel akan bersama-sama kita bagi sesi pembentangan, iaitu pengurusi panel standard program pengajian perniagaan tu Dr. Eddie Chong Soy Choi selaku pengurusi panel, dan bersama beliau adalah Prof Lee Chiu Ging yang merupakan ahli panel kajian semula standard. Semohon jika para hadirin mempunyai soalan yang diajukan, boleh berbuat demikian di bahagian Q&A. Kita ada ruang Q&A di bawah aplikasi webinar ini, dan sekiranya tuan-puan ada soalan boleh mengajukan juga secara live nantilah. Kita akan bagi permission dan sebagainya. Okay, saya rasa tanpa kita melengahkan masa, saya ingin menyerahkan sesi seterusnya kepada pengurusi kita iaitu Dr. Eddie untuk pembentangan bagi semakan semula standard program pengajian perniagaan. Dipersilakan Dr.
Berbanyak terima kasih Cik Zamrin, Tuan Pengerusi Majlis. Cik Zamrin boleh mendengar saya ke Cik Zamrin?
Saya jelas.
Terima kasih. Bagaimana dengan skrin saya, adakah ia jelas? PPT saya, adakah ia boleh dilihat dengan jelas?
Yeah, very clear.
Ya, terima kasih. Thank you very much again Cik Zamrin. Selamat petang dan salam sejahtera. A very good afternoon to yang berbahagia Datuk-Datuk, Datin-Datin, Prof, tuan-tuan dan puan-puan yang dihormati sekalian. May you be well and continue to be well. We are very grateful for his blessings yang membolehkan kami bersama-sama pada petang ini walaupun secara maya. We welcome all our colleagues and friends to this Zoom platform. It is heartening to see that as of now kita ada lebih daripada 350 orang kawan dan rakan bersama-sama kami. Of course, we also learn that there are also friends yang join kita menerusi YouTube. So, regardless of where you are joining us, welcome to our session this afternoon. I'm Eddie, as introduced by Cik Zamrin, and with me is Professor Lee Chiu Ging, one of our panel members for the program standards. And it gives us great pleasure to share the program standards with you, ladies and gentlemen. What we will do in the next 2 hours or so is that I will be making the presentation, whereas my colleague Professor Lee will help me to take questions. And I'm sure you see that turut bersama kami adalah Cik Kamaru Bakri, pengarah bank standard. We have Cik Zamrin, our very good colleague with us. And of course, there are also pegawai-pegawai MQA lain yang boleh memberi pencerahan kepada kami sekiranya tuan-tuan dan puan-puan mempunyai soalan berkaitan dengan dasar, standard ataupun garis panduan yang lain yang diterbitkan oleh MQA. So both Professor Lee and myself will try our level best to clarify if there's any question pertaining to the program standard. Right, so let me move on. So to begin with, let me begin with this slide on the objective of this review. So as Cik Zamrin has rightfully mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, the program standard was first published in March 2015 as a reference and guidance for higher education providers regarding the minimum acceptable practices in designing and offering business programs. So I'm sure all of us would realize that there are a lot of changes in the environment, in how businesses are run, in looking at the evolvement of technology and so on. And therefore, it is timely for us to relook at the program standards again, which is also part of MQA's standard operating procedure, which is to review program standards every 5 years to ensure that the program standards are always terkini, a document that can be used as a rujukan or a guidance to different institutions within that same period of time. At the same time, allowing institutions to be innovative in introducing topics or courses on top of the what is being prescribed in the program standards. So as you can see here, one of the main concern here was the fact that this program standard was first published in 2015. So at that time, kita belum lagi witness MQF second edition as well as COPA second edition. So one of the major objectives of this review was to align the new edition of the program standard to these two documents, the MQF second edition as well as the COPA second edition. And of course, you may be aware that this program standards was published in August 2021. Just 4 months before August 2021, we witnessed the publication of the Master's and Doctoral Degree Standard, which was published in April 2021. So a lot of alignments were also made to the standards for Master's and Doctoral Degree. And of course, along the way, we have also made a number of references to the different documents published by MQA. Sebagai contohnya di COPA ODL, COPTAL, WBL, the work-based learning, and 2U2I, among others. And of course, we also made reference to TVET, the Technical and Vocational Education and Training, to ensure that our program standards can fit into the different requirements for all these different modalities. So that is the reason why you will see that this program standard is much more granular. It is much more comprehensive compared to the first version, where there are a lot of considerations being put into this documentation. And of course, as I've started this slide earlier, another equally important objective of this review is to ensure currency of the program standards in terms of content, while at the same time taking into consideration your dynamic offerings. Right? So as you can see here, there are currently more than 2,300 fully accredited programs in the Malaysian Qualifications Register. So we have actually taken a look at some of the programs for us to have a general idea in terms of the offerings, in terms of the courses, in terms of the area of concentration and so on, right? For us to make an informed judgment, a decision that would fit into the different considerations. Bukan sahaja mengambil kira status sesebuah institusi pengajian tinggi, not just taking into consideration the status of the higher education provider, we also take into consideration sizes, the even offerings, some of which are in-house programs, some of which are franchise programs, and some of which are programs that are offered by the home campuses of the foreign branch university campuses. So we have considered quite a number of programs and also different offerings for us to come to a judgment or a decision regarding the program standards that we see today. So a lot of work has gone into this documentation. And just to give you a slightly more perspective of what we have done over the last 1.5 or 2 years or so, for us to arrive at the document that we are seeing today, tuan-tuan dan puan-puan. So sorry that this slide is a bit small, but the intention is to share with you what have we done, how rigorous the process was that we went through that allowed us to see the fruit of our labor today. So if I can start with, if you look at our top left hand, right, the review process basically began sometime in July 2019 with an impact study carried out by MQA. So this was followed by the formation of a panel, which held our very first meeting in December 2019. So who are the panel members? I'm pleased to acknowledge the panel members who have contributed their ideas and expertise in this second edition of the program standard. So as you can see here, we have Dr. Hazman, who was the immediate past Deputy Chief Executive Officer of MQA, and who is also the Quality Assurance Expert of MQA, and who has also chaired the revision of the standards for master's and doctoral degree. And of course, with us here, Professor Lee. Professor Lee has been with us since 2014, when we worked on the first edition of the program standard. And not just that we relied on his expertise in giving us perspectives of programs that are being run by foreign branch campuses, looking at best practices in Europe and different parts of the world. He has also shared a number of different perspectives with us in a very wide area of domain. So, and his presence has also allowed us to ensure continuity from the first program standard now to the second program standard, so that we can strike a balance between the first publication as well as the subsequent one that we are seeing today. We also have Professor Zafir Khan Muhammad Mahbub from University Kebangsaan Malaysia, and also Tengku Fahrid Witaudin from Scali Group, who has provided his input specifically from the industry's perspective. Right, of course, it is incomplete if we don't recognize our colleagues at MQA, who has been helping us, who has been facilitating the review process. So you may notice from this slide that a total of 20 former panel meetings have been held between December 2019 all the way to before May 2021. And we mentioned former here because there were a number of informal meetings that were not recorded. So we had, and we were probably one of the few that met the most times compared to many other program standards. And I'm sure you know why. We will come to that in a bit, so that we can resonate why we have met so many times. What are the reasons for us to spend so many times the meeting on the screen, for us to finalize a number of issues and to address some concerns from different stakeholders. And of course, one very important part that some of you may be aware of, ladies and gentlemen, we had a dialogue session with the industry on the 20th of January last year. And this has actually helped us to identify apakah yang diperlukan oleh graduate hari ini. What are the competencies that the industry require the graduates to have? So that is a very special session yang kami adakan. It's a very special session that MQA hosted for us to talk to industry representatives. So we asked them, we shared with them the PEOs, the program educational objectives, the program learning outcomes. We share with them the MQF 2.0, and we asked their perspectives. What do they think of the business graduates today in terms of their knowledge, in terms of the skills, in terms of their attitudes? What else? What are the gaps that still persist that would require us to take into consideration when we develop this program standard? So this was one of the very first thing that we did, right? Because we thought that one large part will be missing if we didn't talk to the industry. So once we have spoken to the industry, that was when that was at the same time when we work on our draft, right? Especially our first draft. So the resulting first draft was presented to the MQA senior officers on the 21st of January 2021. Right. So imagine from December to January, a lot had happened during that short period of time, you know, where we came up with the resulting draft. And of course, with the pandemic last year, there were some challenges that we faced in terms of getting ideas or conveying our ideas, conveying our contributions across, especially through the online platform. And once the MQA senior officers had taken a look at the first draft, we had stakeholders workshops on the 9th of February this year. I'm sure some of us, ladies and gentlemen, have participated in the 2 workshops, one of which was held specifically for the higher education providers, as well as some industry representatives, employers, alumni, some students. So MQA invited them to join one of these sessions. We also had the second stakeholder workshop, which was meant specifically for MQA officers and the panel of assessors. So as you can imagine, it involved quite a number of different stakeholders, namely the public and private higher education providers, relevant government and statutory agencies, professional bodies, industry, panel of assessors, our own MQA officers, alumni, and students. So we collected their feedback, which we are going to share with you shortly. We collected their feedback, which was subsequently discussed and incorporated. We then, through MQA, solicited public feedback. So not only we stopped at the stakeholders workshop, we also solicited feedback from the public by putting our draft on MQA's portal, right? And making an announcement to the higher education providers to take a look at the document and to provide us with your feedback. So this was done if I'm not mistaken, 29th of March to 12th April this year. So that's about 2 weeks. And subsequently, we had our 20th panel meeting. So it was, although it was called a 20th meeting, I'm sure Prof. Lee would remember that it was not a one-day meeting, it was several days meeting, but we combined that as a 20th panel meeting for us to document all the feedback that we have received from you, ladies and gentlemen. And on that basis, we made refinements to the program standard, to the document, before we present the draft to MQA Council on the 27th of May this year. And of course, before the council meeting. So in between 12th of April to 27th of May, we also had several meetings, one of which was with MQA management, again to present our draft, and subsequently to the pre-council members of MQA before the draft was presented to the MQA Council on the 27th of May. So this is to give all of us the perspective, ladies and gentlemen, how much time, effort, and initiatives that we have put in that resulted in the program standards that we see today. Right. So let me now move on to share with you what are the major feedback that we have collected from all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and how have we incorporated your feedback into the program standards. So what you see on the left were statements taken verbatim from our colleagues, from some of our colleagues. So they are statements taken verbatim. And what you see on your right would be our responses, which you would already see them appearing in the program standards document, right? So these feedback were actually solicited from at least 2 different venues. The first one was an impact study. If you remember, if you recall, I mentioned about the impact study that MQA carried out in July 2019. So we have collected some feedback from the impact study. We have also collected some feedback during the industry dialogue session that we had in January last year. So we have collated them, which I'm going to show you on this slide, as well as the 3 other slides that follow. And we have also collected feedback from the stakeholders workshop that we had on the 9th of February. So we collated all this feedback, and on that basis, we look at each of them and look at how can they be best incorporated in the program standards. So to begin with, the first 2 slides, this slide and the next slide, would show us the feedback that we have collected from the impact study as well as from the industry dialogue session. Right. So what was the first feedback here? We have revised the BOK. I'm sure we will all notice, we will all observe that we have revised the body of knowledge or BOK of the common core areas to reflect the basic concepts of business. Again, this was because of the feedback given by the industry representatives at that time that our business graduates lack of business fundamentals. So they were hoping that we could sharpen our graduates' business fundamentals. And because of that, and also taking into consideration the contemporary areas in business that are evolving as we witness today, which I'm going to show you in a bit. So we felt that there is a need to revise our BOK to reflect the basic concepts of business, while at the same time introducing digitalization. So because of this, we have made it clear in our program standard that acknowledging the wide area of the 6 common cores, in the higher education institutions have the flexibility of freedom to incorporate the body of knowledge either as courses or topics within courses. So they do not necessarily have to be courses on their own. So we leave it very much to the design of the program and how the course learning outcomes are being formulated, and of course, subsequently, how constructive alignment is being achieved. So that is one part that we leave it to the institutions to decide what is best for the design of your program. Right. Moving on the second feedback, which is to address the suggestion to include the body of knowledge for logistics and transportation management. I'm sure we'll notice that we have introduced and refined the BOK on logistics and supply chain management under the discipline core by integrating the additional BOKs as suggested by our different stakeholders. Right. So this is definitely a good news for some of us who are offering this specialization in logistics and transportation management. And to address the third feedback on the removal of compulsory courses for specialist master's program. So we have now indicated in a new edition of the program standards that the curriculum for specialist masters is to be designed based on the discipline core only, without the need to cover common core, right? Which is only required for the general master's program. So to us who are offering programs like masters in marketing, masters in HRM, masters in some other areas of management as a general area, right? We only need to refer to the discipline core without the need for us to incorporate what we see in the common core, right? So with that, we hope that will help to ease some of you, especially those our friends here who are offering specialist master's programs. All right, moving on. One major change in the new program standard is that the requirement for final examination as summative assessment, right, has been removed for all MQF levels, right? So we thought that it is much more important to expose our students to competency-based assessments, allowing them not just to pick up the technical knowledge, but also to sharpen their soft skills. And because of that, we saw limitations in final examination, right? And now we are allowing institutions more freedom to design your assessments so long they can measure the course learning outcomes, right? Of course, that didn't stop you. That doesn't stop us from adopting final examination. We leave it to you. What is the best possible way to assess our students to ensure that the CLOs are met, to ensure that they possess the competencies that we want them to possess, right? So that is one good news for all of us here. We also took cognizance of the view from the industry representatives, right? Again, as I've mentioned earlier, what they wanted was focus more on the fundamental business areas rather than focusing a lot on the non-business areas. So a lot of our, according to them, a lot of our programs involve students having mixture of courses from non-business areas. And due to the limitation of credit hours, due to the limitation that we can put in terms of content, they would want us to sharpen, they would want us to widen the fundamentals of business so that our graduates will have a good grasp of the different fundamental, different basics of business, right? And because of that, as I've shared earlier, we retain the common core, right? We retain the common core as we could see in Appendix 3 of the document. We retain the 6 areas of the common core, and at the same time, we introduce digitalization, right? And you will also see that we have replaced decision science with business analytics, right? But having said so, you will see that much of the BOK from decision science has now been absorbed into other common core areas, especially the management area, right? With some retained under business analytics, and we have also introduced additional topics under business analytics, which we will look at in a bit. Moving on is our attempt to clarify what is meant by relevant experience. So we realized that this was a question that was frequently asked by different institutions. How do we define relevant experience? So in the program standards, we have made a statement in the program standard to define what is relevant experience, in which we make reference to academic experience, which we deem is broader in nature. So this will allow our institutions a greater flexibility in taking into consideration the different academic experiences of the program leaders that we are about to appoint, right, for our respective business programs. All right, moving on. So this slide and the following slide are basically feedbacks that we have received from stakeholders during the stakeholders workshops held on the 9th of February. If you look at the first feedback, this is all about the application of SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, that we have all taken a look at the program standards, whereby we have included a statement on SDGs in the document in terms of how Sustainable Development Goals can be supported through teaching and learning, curricular activities, as well as assessment strategies within the general content of our business programs without touching on the credit hours. So we may still, right, we may still be offering courses like business ethics, say for example, but when it comes to projects, right, we may expose students to projects relating to ethics, but projects that also touch upon some of the 17 areas of SDGs. Right? So this is to expose our next generation of graduates to have wider appreciation of the world, right? Looking at what are the priorities of the world, looking at what are the contributions that they could make as responsible citizens of the country, of the community, of the world. So because of that, we are not asking institutions to have very specific dedicated courses on SDGs. All we want to see or hope for is students are exposed to SDGs. They know what SDGs are all about. They know the 17 SDGs. They are also exposed to some activities regarding the SDGs. So that will be enough to begin them with, to start them with, right? And moving on will be the introduction of the BOK for technology management, right? We are realizing that more and more institutions are offering Bachelor in Technology Management. in which the majority, a huge branch of the BOK comes from business, right? And because of that, we have made an analysis of the different technology management programs that are being offered. And we also realized that there are technology management programs that are beyond business, right? And due to that, we have incorporated the BOK for technology management in the program standards with a condition that if we are designing a technology management program based on the old NEC codes of 340 and 345, that's where program standard business akan diguna pakai. Okay, so this program standard will be applied to programs in technology management that use these old codes of NEC 340 and 345. Right, and this is particularly to support the initiatives by MTUN, the Malaysian Technical Universities Network, to produce more technological related, or technology related managers or technologies who can manage both technology as well as having a good grasp of management knowledge. So this is indeed one big change that we have made to the program standards. And as mentioned earlier, these program standards also recognizes the importance of digitalization, which we are sure, Prof. Lee and myself are sure that all of us are aware at this point of time, after having had a good glance of the program standards. So we have basically looked at digitalization in all aspects of business. And therefore, we will likely see digitalization in all the common core areas, as well as in most of the discipline core areas, if not all, right? We will come back to that part soon for us to give you some snapshots on what are the areas that we have introduced, particularly relating to digitalization in the common core as well as in the discipline core of the business studies areas, right? We will come to that soon. Before that, let us now come into the program educational objectives and program learning outcomes. You may notice that in the first edition of the program standards, tak ada program educational objectives, tak ada PEOs. There were no PEOs in the first edition of the program standards. And the reason is simple, because at that time, belum ada lagi MQF 2.0. Tak ada lagi COPA 2.0. So because of that, the program standards, the first version of program standards, we only indicated the program aims. What are the proposed program aims? Right? But now with the PEOs in place, that was when we decided that we have to replace the program aims with the PEOs for different levels of programs, from certificate to doctoral level within business studies, right? So again, the PEOs now drive the PLOs, the program learning outcomes, which also inform the curriculum design and delivery aspect, right? We will come to that later, but before we move towards that, let me just flash through the PEOs for different levels of the business programs. So as you can see here, this is the guidance for the certificate level programs, whereby there are 5 PEOs: possess broad-based theoretical and practical knowledge in business, possess broad-based operational and entrepreneurial skills to perform effectively and responsibly in different organizations, use wide range of digital applications and numeracy skills, demonstrate teamwork, interpersonal communication, creativity, innovation skills, and pursue lifelong learning, right? So these were the general guide or guidance that we are providing to institutions. Of course, it doesn't mean that you must follow, right? Exactly verbatim, word by word. The flexibility is with the institutions so long the PEOs relate to your vision and mission. What you want to do, what kind of graduates you want to produce, right? And what are the graduate attributes that you are seeing, that you hope to see from your program. And that is a point that differentiates the PEOs with PLOs. We are very sure that some of you may ask us, why are the PEOs similar to the PLOs? Right? Logically speaking, they should be similar because as we are all aware of at this point of time, PLOs are measured at the end of the program. So someone who is about to graduate from the program, someone who has passed all the courses, is deemed to have met all the PLOs. So 3 years or 5 years down the road, what do we want to see from this graduate? So we know that, we realize that not all of them will pursue the path, right, or the pathway that they have intended to pursue because of the degree that they have done 5 years ago, you know. But to the majority who have completed the degree, we would expect them to achieve these PEOs 3 to 5 years down the road. You know, if we bump into a very, you know, an excellent graduate, an average graduate, or even a merely past graduate in any of the shopping complexes or anywhere outside of the campus, you know, 5 years down the road, we would expect to see this in them. You know, the attributes, ciri-ciri graduan. You know, what have we done 5 years ago that have molded our graduates to show these characteristics to us? So we leave this guidance to you, ladies and gentlemen, right, for the certificate level program. For diploma program, similarly, there are 5 PEOs as well, but you will notice that the words that we use are slightly different. Again, because we would expect the diploma graduates to show higher level of competencies compared to a certificate graduate. So that's where you see the differences in the verbs. Moving on to the bachelor level, again, you see there are still 5 PEOs that we are proposing, but you will see that the verbs are increasing in complexity as well. So not only are we expecting our graduates to demonstrate broad-based knowledge, they must also possess in-depth knowledge, right? And they must also possess a very comprehensive managerial and entrepreneurial skills, right? They can also use a broad range of digital applications and analytical techniques, you know, and this is through the different software applications, the different part of the courses, mathematics or statistics that we have incorporated in the program to allow our students to have a better interpretation skills, to allow them to also use different software applications for them to interpret the data that they have obtained, to arrive at different conclusions and to move ahead towards solving a problem or to make a decision, right? So this was our thoughts when we formulated the PEOs for the bachelor level program, right? There are of course other more generic skills like teamwork, leadership, interpersonal communication, and also the ability to commit and seek learning, continuous learning for personal and professional development, right? So all these are rather generic skills which will be developed by the students through the different interventions that we put in the program itself, right? Through assignments, projects, and also different other interventions, extracurricular activities dan sebagainya, right? So when the students move to the master's level, again, we are now seeing verbs. We are now seeing PEOs at the deeper level of complexity. right? Not only they possess in-depth knowledge, but they must demonstrate mastery, right? They must master the area that they are in. They must also be able to demonstrate the ability to carry out certain functions within business, right? So this is usually done through projects, through assignments, perhaps a combination of case studies, as well as maybe a final year project that allows students to look at, say, business plan, right? Some students may be asked to develop business plans for their final year projects, even at the master's level, right? And some of them may produce a case study on an actual problem facing an organization. So we see here that there's a much more practicality aspect in play, right, for program at this level. So similarly for other PEOs, right, we want the graduates to be able to show that they are able to adopt, they are able to apply broad range of digital applications and analytical techniques, right? At the bachelor's level, what we were asking for was the ability to use different platforms, different software. At master's level, we are already asking them to be able to evaluate which one is the best to be used given certain circumstances, right? So we can see here there is sort of an increasing in terms of cognitive level, even in terms of the psychomotor level, in terms of how do we pick and choose the best applications that could fit into the problem within the context that we are looking at, right? Of course, for masters by mixed mode, we have another PEO, the sixth PEO on research skills, right? Again, because mixed mode has a big component on research. It's either 50-50, 40-60, or 30-70, whereby the 50, 60, 70 are basically the research component. So because of that, we are also expecting our graduates, 3 or 5 years down the road, to be able to show their ability to apply a range of research skills, right? And we tie that research skills specifically to the business and management areas in terms of how they solve the issues in the business and also in the management realm. There are 5 PEOs for masters by research. Again, if you look at the PEOs, they are aligned to the MDD. They are also in a large extent, to a very large extent, aligned to the PS before, the existing, the old program standards, whereby we still expect our graduates with a master's by research degree to be able to demonstrate mastery in theory and in practice, especially in the field of business, develop and implement research independently and responsibly. This is where the ethics and professionalism come into play. The graduate must be able to adopt appropriate methods and techniques for research, and of course, demonstrate collaborative and interpersonal communication skills. So we would expect someone to be able to present his or her research findings, either orally or in writing, and also across different stakeholders, right? And the last PEO is, of course, the spirit, the lifelong learning spirit, for the person to continue his or her pursuit for either a higher degree or different learning, whether it is informal or non-formal learning that the person would likely be exposed to throughout his or her career. Right? So moving on will be the doctoral by coursework and mixed mode. For coursework and mixed mode, we retain the 5 PEOs. Right? We are proposing the 5 same PEOs for doctoral by coursework and mixed mode. Right? Again, because they have a very large connotation on research. Even a doctoral by coursework program has a big component on research. So because of that, we see that regardless of whether someone who has completed a doctoral by coursework or mixed mode, that someone would show more or less similar attributes in terms of the ability to possess mastery and advanced knowledge in business, that someone is able to advance theory through rigorous research. So that's why, regardless of whether coursework or mixed mode, we expect to see this kind of attribute in our graduates. So of course, PEO 3, 4, and 5 remain more or less the same. Again, at this level, we would expect the graduates to be able to tell us not only which are the better applications, but which is the best application, given the context, given the nature of research that I am doing. So what kind of application that would best suit my nature of research? So we would want that individuals, we will want those graduates to be able to demonstrate this, right? Effective collaborative and interpersonal communication skills and lifelong learning, they are the same, right? Even with the bachelor's and master's degree program. Okay, moving on is the guidance for doctoral by research. So for doctoral by research, there are 6 PEOs as guidance to institutions, all right? But as I've mentioned earlier, that the freedom is with you, ladies and gentlemen. The freedom is with you to provide additional. You can have more, you can have lesser objectives, but they must reflect your vision and mission, right? They must reflect what is the institution standing for, and what kind of graduates that my institution is producing. How do I aim to produce them? So this will be translated into the PEOs along with the 5 clusters of learning outcomes, right? So we leave it to you, and I'm sure to some of our colleagues here who are MQA panel of assessors, we will be flexible enough to look at institutions' offerings now from different perspectives, looking at how the PEOs could fit into the institution. But again, what is important that we would like to highlight this over and again is constructive alignment. So kita kena pastikan penjajaran konstruktif tu ada, right? Regardless of how we shape our PEOs, kita mesti nampak pertalian atau perkaitan antara PEO dengan PLO, dengan CLO, dengan kaedah pengajaran dan pembelajaran, dan juga kaedah pentaksiran. So all these must be speaking the same language. So that is one important point that we would like to stress at this point of time. So moving on will be the PLOs. So I'm sure we are all aware that PLOs memang ada in the first edition of the program standard. They were there in the first version of program standards, but the PLOs at that time were based on the 8 learning outcomes, the OMQF 1.0 8 learning outcomes. So as we move towards MQF second edition, we have improvised upon the PLOs based on the 5 clusters of learning outcomes. So you will see the detail in table 2.1 on pages 10 to 16 of the program standards document. Right, you will see the details there, which show us the proposed PLOs based on these 5 classes of the learning outcomes. Right, so as we look into this, ladies and gentlemen, we actually spent a few meetings, even until late at night, to ensure that we could encapsulate the gist behind the 5 clusters, looking into the existing PLOs in the old program standard. We examine their relevance. We look at the newly developed PEOs, right, that we have seen a moment ago, right? And we look at the MQF 2.0. And we also look into the TVET requirements. So we actually considered a wide range of information for us to arrive at what we see as PLOs for the different levels of programs. So as you can see here, these are the PLOs for the certificate level program. So we arrive at 9, but of course, this doesn't stop us from having 8, 9, 10, or 11 PLOs. So we can even have 12, we can even have 13. Now, what is important for us to bear in mind is that by having this set of PLOs, can we measure them? Now that we have to measure the attainment of the PLOs. So as we formulate our PLOs, we must ask ourselves this question: can we measure them? How best can we measure them? Can we quantify our measurement? Is it objective? Is it subjective? And are we measuring the right thing? Are we confident that our measures, our rulers, are accurate enough to reflect the achievement of our would-be graduates or soon-to-be graduates? So that will be, to us, the most important question that we have to bear in mind, right? So we leave it to you, ladies and gentlemen. How do you want to frame the PLOs? But what is important, again, let's look at the measurement. Let's look at how can we translate these PLOs into the CLOs, right? And the other point that we also want to stress here is that if we look at most of the PLOs, especially from PLOs 4 to 11, they are quite generic, right? They touch on interpersonal communication, they touch on digital numeracy, leadership, autonomy and responsibility, ethics and professionalism, personal skills. They are quite generic. But for PLOs 1 to 3, they have very specific connotation to business. And therefore, as we formulate the PLOs, especially PLOs 1, 2, and 3, we will need to pay attention on the business side, of things. Rather than making them too generic a set of PLOs, they must reflect the business area. More so if it is a specialist degree program, a bachelor in marketing, masters in human resources management, right? When it is a specialist degree, that is where PLOs 1, 2, and perhaps PLO 3 will need to reflect the specialization of the program, right? So that, again, it aids measurement. It tells us very clearly what we want to achieve from the program by the end of the day. So let us bear all this in mind. We will not go through all the PLOs because they are there in the documentation, which you can see again from page 10 to 16. But if you have any question, please feel free to ask us, to put in the Q&A or the chat box. My very good colleague here, Professor Lee, will help us to address the questions. I'm sorry, I may not be looking at the chat box at this point of time, but we will look at the chat box together later on. All right, so this is Diploma. We are also proposing as many as 9 PLOs for Diploma, 9 for Bachelors, 9 for Masters by Coursework, right? 9 for Masters by Mixed Mode, 9 for Masters by Research, 9 for Doctoral by Coursework and Mixed Mode, and similarly 9 for Doctoral by Research, right? If just in case, if your next question to us was why 9, what happened to the other 2, right? What we did was, as we look into the TVET programs, and as we look into some of the connections between the clusters of learning outcomes, we saw resemblance in the practical skills and ethics and professionalism. And this is where, this is especially true for TVET and also for us to articulate on the practical side of the program, right? For the practical skills side. We also see relevance in terms of interpersonal and communication skills, right? So because of that, we propose these 9 PLOs across. But again, that doesn't stop you, ladies and gentlemen, from having 11. You may decide to have 11. You may decide to have one, the 11 under the 5 classes of learning outcome. You may decide to have 1 PLO each. That is absolutely fine, right? What we would like to stress here is they must be measurable, right? They must be measurable, and we see a good alignment between your PLOs with your PEOs, and also between your PLOs with your CLOs, right? So that is what we ask for. All right. So moving forward is the areas of business studies. So if you remember earlier on, I was sharing with you some aspects of digitalization and new aspects that we have added, right, to the program standard. So let me address them here under this slide, right? In our analysis, we arrive at a conclusion that business studies remain a broad academic subject. It is very broad, and it is evolving, right? Business studies is evolving. So that itself was an issue for us to actually determine the 4 corners of business. Can we draw a line? Can we come up with a boundary? And when we decide on the business area, so this is where we started to witness that there are also areas that are not so management, but has the management flavor in the areas themselves. Sports management, right? Architectural management, healthcare management, right? To give some examples of what are the areas that marry management with the technical area. So because of that, it is a challenge. It was a challenge 6 years ago when we developed the first edition of the program standards, and it still remains a challenge today for all of us to provide a single all-encompassing definition of business studies. All right, so we must put a qualifier here that the revised program standards that we see today is a combination of the legacy work done by our previous panel, including Prof. Lee, who is with us today, the current offerings by the higher education providers. So we look into your offerings. Yeah, we went into the MQR, then we went into your websites. Just to look at your program structure, looking at your courses, looking at how you allocate credit, looking at how do you actually structure your programs according to core, specialization, industrial training, and so on. So we went in depth. We really went into looking at your programs, looking at what you offer, and how the differences between institutions are being noted, right, in the current program standard. We also look at MDD. We look at the master's and doctoral degree by research that MQA has produced. And of course, we also look at other program standards. We look at the newly just created, just produced program standards to ensure that there's consistency between one document to another. So it is a rigorous process, right? It is indeed a very, very rigorous process. And I think I really acknowledge the panel members who work nonstop, who work until late at night, some of them even early in the morning, to prepare for our next meeting and to come up with what we see in the documentation, right? So I'm deeply grateful to the panel members. So based on a wide-ranging definition of business studies and also a review of your programs, we are proposing these 6 essential or common core areas: human resource management, marketing, accounting and finance, business economics, management, and business analytics. So if you notice, the first 5 areas do not change. They remain the same. They are the same as before, as in the first edition of the program standards. What we changed was only the last box on business analytics, which was initially decision science. So we have replaced decision science with business analytics, and we have distributed what we see initially in decision science to the other common core areas, mostly in the management area. So that was what we did, while at the same time introducing digitalization in these common areas. On your right, you will see the extension of the discipline core areas of business programs, right? Those bolded, right, are those newly introduced areas, some of which have been improvised or enhanced so that they become a prominent discipline on its own, right? So that was when we built in sufficient BOK for these areas to stand on their own. If you want further details, of course, you will see that in Appendix 3 of the program standards. They will give us the detail of the 6 common core areas and the 12 discipline core areas. So now let me go slightly in depth into what are the differences, what are new areas that we are seeing in this program standard, especially as far as digitalization is concerned. Right. So you will see that for HR, right, particularly for human resources management, we realize that global talent management is becoming an important area, especially when businesses are now operated across borders. Right now that we have the emergence of online shoppers and also e-commerce platforms that could be operated in any part of the world. We are also seeing the call centers being operated in different parts of the world, serving different customers of different countries. We are also seeing a number of business functions that are increasingly being outsourced. So because of that, we have refined the topics under HR to introduce global talent management and also global HR issues in outsourcing. So these two could be additional topics that you could introduce in your existing HRM course or courses in order to expose our students to these two contemporary topics. In marketing, we have introduced marketing metrics, right? Now that with the support of big data, data analytics, blockchain, so we want to expose our students to marketing metrics. We want to expose our students to modeling techniques. And this is especially important for marketing planning and decision making under marketing research. Right? So we want students to be able to carry out research that are of practical implications, something that they could sharpen their skills for, right, as far as big data, data analytics are concerned, right, which could help them to make better decisions for their organization's marketing initiatives. We have also introduced innovation management, especially under product management, right? So innovation, as we know, is the buzzword of the day, right? People are looking at the economy, which is increasingly knowledge-based and circular-based, right? So how could innovation play a role, right, in our program? We have also introduced sales management. So let us put a qualifier here that sales management is nothing new. It has nothing to do with digitalization, but we realize that this is what the industry told us. We want our students to have this acumen, to be able to sell. So regardless of what we do in the company, we may be a marketing manager, a HR manager, we may be some other managers, but we must be able to sell. So that is why we have added the BOK of sales management in the marketing part of it, including digital marketing. Right. So again, if we have marketing courses, we can embed them as courses. We can also embed them as topics within courses. So we leave it to the wisdom of the institutions to decide how best is to design our programs to incorporate this body of knowledge. All right, for finance, again, of course, we are not looking at hardcore finance, as in finance. We are looking at business finance. So this is where if you are offering BBA finance, right? Or you are offering finance as a specialization rather than a specialist degree, the program standards for business studies will be applicable to you. But of course, that doesn't stop you from making reference to the program standards for finance, right? But for the finance part, what we have added, including fintech and cybersecurity. So again, they are related to digitalization. We want our BBA finance students or BA or BSc finance students to appreciate fintech, to appreciate blockchain, to appreciate artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, dan sebagainya. Right? Those are the areas, evolving areas of concern today and also into the future. For business economics, we have refined a bit of the BOK under econometrics. So this is something that we can make reference to in the program standard. Okay, under management, management is a big area. It is a big umbrella, right? We have also refined some topics under leadership and organizational theory and design. We have moved project management and TQM, which was previously under business information system, now to management, right? So we try to rationalize both the common core and also the discipline core, so that with the hope it will ease the institutions when we decide on which part of the common core and which part of the discipline core that we are looking at. Okay, under digital business, right, which is one of the discipline core of business programs, we have introduced topics like e-commerce, big data analytics, and digital marketing, right? So again, you are likely to see some overlapping of topics, which we will rationalize later as we look at the next slide, right? How the overlapping topics can be addressed. Under business analytics, we also introduce new BOK. You will see data analytics, data visualization, predictive analytics, and prescriptive analytics. Right? So we have introduced these big, important topics under business analytics. And we have also introduced business intelligence under business information systems. We have also added governance in a BOK of ethics and strategic management, right? Knowing that governance is a big thing. Governance, compliance are the big issues concerning organizations today. We have also, as I mentioned earlier, incorporated blockchain, AIs, and digital currency under the BOK of digital business and values-based management under the BOK of strategic management. Right. So these are amongst the changes that I can recall. There are, of course, many more changes that you can see from the program standards as we compare between the first edition and the second edition, right? And this is with the hope that the current BOK is much more solid, containing the fundamental areas of business, and at the same time containing sufficient content on or BOK on digitalization. So you will also see from the program standards that we maintain the statement that although higher education providers have the flexibility to design their own business studies programs to reflect the current practices and to offer high quality academic programs, the higher education providers should cover the BOK in this document. So this is another change that we made. This was not there in the first edition, but in the second edition, we wanted the body of knowledge to be the minimum knowledge for every program. So when we set the minimum, that is when our institutions will have some level of freedom to decide what else you want to put in a program. And this is translated into the curriculum design and delivery, the program structure that we are going to witness in a bit, right, in my following slide. All right, now let's look at my following slide. This is the program structure that we are introducing in this new program standard, right? We are very sure that if we refer to the first edition of the program standards, the structure was rather straightforward. there's only one structure for certificate, one structure for diploma, one structure for bachelor, one structure for master, and of course, we have different structures for doctoral degree that we are also seeing today. Based on our investigation, if I could use the word investigation or examination, looking into different offerings, looking into different programs by you locally and also by our colleagues, our friends internationally. That's where we started seeing a diverse types of offerings. You know, even at the diploma level, we are already seeing at least 2 different variants in the offering. So, for instance, we see a general diploma in business. We also see diploma in marketing, which is a specialist diploma. Right. Likewise, for bachelor degree programs, we are also seeing a great variety of different offerings by our colleagues, by our counterparts here in Malaysia, by our foreign branch campuses, as well as by the franchise programs. You know, so because of that, we have attempted to group them into different clusters. So we have certificate, a cluster on its own. We have diploma, they are a cluster on its own, but with 2 varieties: a general diploma, diploma in business as an example, or a specialist diploma in HRM. Right, for bachelors, there are 6 of them. You will see this in table 2.3 in a document. If I remember correctly, from page 19 to 31 of the document. Right, so they are there showing the structure and also showing the teaching and learning, the recommended delivery methods for each one of these variation. Right, so this is to give you some ideas. Those in, if you see those in red, right, those in red were the range of credits in the first edition of the program standards. Those in black are what we are proposing now in the new program standards as minimum credit. So rather than prescribing a range, we are prescribing minimum, right? Minimum, so that there is some room or some flexibilities for institutions to fill up the remaining credits. But what is important is for us to ensure that we have covered sufficient core, we have covered sufficient specialization, we have also covered the compulsory credits. Other than that, if there's any excess, they could be electives, they could come from business areas, they may also come from non-business areas. So that is one of the objectives of changing the way of how we interpret, of how we present the information in terms of minimum credit. So if we look at the compulsory modules, right, they are prescribed by MOHE with this minimum credit stated in the circular by MOHE. So we took this as the minimum for us to determine how many minimum credits that we have to allocate for compulsory courses. Right, for core courses, right, core here contains a common core. Remember the 6 areas that we have been talking about in the last slide. So the 6 areas form the common core areas, and the 12 areas form the discipline core. So that is how we define common core and the discipline core. Right. Okay, we also included industrial training and specialization under core, right, under the core component. Reason being, this is part of policy. So if you need more information on this, ladies and gentlemen, we have Cik Zamrin here. We also have some of our MQA colleagues here who would be more than happy to explain to us the structure, how it looks like. There are certain percentages prescribed in the policy documents that we must have certain percentages of common and discipline core, right, as well as a ceiling on the specialization. So if you look at the minimum credits here, they are in accordance to the policy documents, right? So we have looked at the various policy documents, how many percent that each part has to contain, and therefore on that basis, we calculate the minimum credit, right? If we look at the common core across, right, they are basically consistent. If you look at certificate, 48, diploma, 48, and if you look at degree, they are 42, right? They are 42. Again, where do these 48, 42 come from, right? They come from the 6 areas of the common core. So we can either divide that 6 areas into a number of courses to make up these 48 or 42 credits, right? We may even organize some of the BOK under these 6 common core areas as topics within certain courses, and they would make up that 42 or 48 minimum credits for common core, right? Okay, for discipline core, so this is where we will need to go slightly deeper into especially the bachelor part, right? For us to understand better why there are variations and why there are different conditions for different areas. So if we look at the diploma program, which I've explained earlier, we have the general diploma, diploma in business. For specialist diploma, we also have diploma in HRM, diploma in marketing, dan sebagainya. Right? For bachelor program, we may have a general bachelor program. Right? So for instance, BBA, right? BBA, very common. No specialization, nothing at all, Bachelor of Business. Right? A very general BBA program. We may also have a specialist BBA program. So for instance, Bachelor in Marketing, right? A specialist bachelor's program. We may also have major with specialization, which is one of the most common offerings that we see in the MQR. For instance, BBA in bracket entrepreneurship, BBA in bracket banking and finance, BBA in bracket HRM. So this is one of the very common programs that we see in the market. We also have major with minor. So under major with minor, we also have 2 different varieties. One is specialist major with minor. So for instance, Bachelor in Marketing with IT. So marketing is a specialist field. We may also have a general major with minor. For instance, Bachelor in Business with IT. Right? So these are the 2 different variations under major with minor. Right? Under double major, we may also have conditions or circumstances whereby we have double major within business itself. So for instance, Bachelor in Marketing and HRM. So both areas are within the program standards. We may also have double major in different areas, whether or not there is a program standard for that area. For instance, Bachelor in HRM and IT, right? Bachelor in Marketing and engineering, say for example, right? 2 different areas, but they form double major. So all these variations will have different implications in terms of how do we treat the discipline core. So if we look at general diploma, we look at general single major, we look at major with specialization, right? And also general major with minor, right? If we look at these offerings, we purposely say that the institution must cover at least 3 out of the 12 discipline core areas. All right. Again, because remember, if we allow our students to only cover 1 discipline area, it could exceed, it could reach, if it doesn't exceed the percentage required for specialization. By that time, we will be at danger of having the wrong nomenclature for our program. So because of that, we said that for these general programs, we must expose our students to as many discipline core as possible. So we may even have one course in each discipline, but at least we must cover 3 of the discipline core areas. It could be 4, it could be 5, it could be 6, but at least it must be 3. It cannot be less than 3 discipline core, right? So same reason, as mentioned earlier, we want to expose our students to as a broad area as possible. But if they are doing specialist diploma, or if they are doing specialist degree, bachelor in marketing, or if they are doing a specialist major with minor, this is when we want every single area within the discipline core to be covered. Right, so instead of widening or broadening the students' exposure of different business fields, for these specialist degree programs, we will have to create as many courses within that discipline core as possible, so as to fulfill the number of minimum credits here prescribed here, either 27 for diploma, 36 for bachelors. All right. For double major, let me address major with specialization first. So, okay, you will see that for specialization, there is an additional 30 credits identified under specialization. Right. Similarly, for major with minor, there is also an additional 30 credits. So, which means that students who are doing a major with specialization or major with minor will have a very broad knowledge of business, as well as a very deep knowledge of the areas that they are specializing in, right? And because of that, we see a significant amount of credits allocated to major with specialization, as well as major with minor, right? For double major, whether within business or with another discipline, so this is where, if it is within business, we have to ensure that there is a 50-50 coverage between the 2 discipline core. Say, for instance, bachelors in marketing and HRM. So we must ensure that 50% or 36 credits covered marketing and 36 credits covered HRM. Okay. For a double major that is outside of the program standards, we will have to fulfill the call for program standards in business. We also have to fulfill the program standards of another discipline, or if there's no program standards, at least 66 credits from the second major. So as a result, right, we actually leave industrial training to be open. So we leave it to your wisdom, we leave it to you whether you want to introduce industrial training. We also leave it to you if you want to introduce electives, either free or discipline electives, depending on the subtotal credits that we see at the bottom of the slide. So for instance, like certificate, the minimum is 52. For diploma, the minimum is 81. So you have an excess of 8 credits for certificate and an excess of 9 credits for diploma. For us to decide, what do we want to introduce for the 9 credits? Do I want to introduce 3 electives, or do I want to introduce 1 elective plus industrial training, 3 and 6 credits? So we leave it to the institution. For general single major or even specialist single major, you see there is also a huge room of credits, 86 versus 120, where we can actually build in a number of elective courses. But what we need to ensure here is that we do not take electives from only one specialization. Again, because if we were to combine the excess credits together, they would form a specialization on its own. And this will have issue on your nomenclature. So because of that, we want the remaining, right, the 120 minus 86, the remaining credits to be as wide as possible. But again, we have to ensure that the fundamental of business is covered, as what our industry experts have been telling us. However, for major with specialization, major with minor, and double major, we see very little room. We see very little room for these programs just because of the credits of the policy document that we have to adhere to. So because of that, we have very little room for us to introduce electives, or even for us to look at the different variety of offering. So we will have to now look into the practicality of the programs that we are offering, the courses that we are offering. If they are overlapping of courses, of course, that is acceptable. That would help us to also reduce some of the credits that we have allocated for discipline core, right? But again, the judgment is how do we then look into the completeness of the program, how complete it is. Okay, moving on to the master's degree program. So again, we have introduced general and specialist masters. A general master is an MBA, for example. A specialist master's is a master's in marketing. All right. So within the general masters, we have also introduced general masters with specialization and general masters without specialization. So if we see in a bracket, MBA in energy management, MBA in HRM, MBA in marketing, MBA in IT management. So those are what we call general masters with specialization. So general masters with specialization and without specialization will have different minimum credits. So if you look at the first column, if it is a general MBA, if it's a general MBA, the minimum credit here is only 36. Right, the minimum here is only 36. 30 credits from Common Core and 6 credits from the project paper. If it comes with specialization, there is an addition a minimum of 10 credits. So which means that the MBA program with specialization now will have a minimum of 46 credits. Right. If it is a specialist master's in marketing, as mentioned earlier, a specialist master's doesn't need to cover a Common Core. It only needs to cover the discipline core. And therefore, we see the minimum 24 credits here are being allocated for the discipline core. So the 24 plus 6, right, which is the project paper, the minimum now becomes 30. So now you have the freedom to decide what you want to do with the 10 credits. Right? What are the other courses that you want to offer for the 10 credits? As far as research methodology is concerned, it is not allocated credit per se, but they are embedded in the core part itself. So you can replace one of the core courses with research methodology. So for Masters by Research, it remains the same. Just like Doctoral by Research, they remain the same, right? What may have changed is that according to MDD, research methodology may no longer be a formal course on its own. It could be a workshop. It could be done in any way, so long there is a formal way of allowing the students to learn different research methodologies. There is also a way for them to pick up the skills that they need to carry out their research. So you may find further details in the programs that are in the standards for MDD. Right. We have also identified the minimum credits for Doctoral by Coursework and Doctoral by Makesmore. There is also a recommended word limit for thesis. Again, it's recommended. Yeah, it is not compulsory. It is recommended. How do we arrive at these figures? We look at different universities in Malaysia. We look at different universities overseas to look at what are the range of word limit, the range of words that these universities are imposing on their students. So on that basis, we arrive at an average word limit which we could see here. 15,000 for masters by coursework, 20,000 for masters by mixed mode, masters by research 35,000, all the way to doctoral by research 70,000 words. Again, they are recommended. They are recommended. We leave it to you to decide how many words that you want to impose for your thesis or project, but make sure that the word count commensurates with the credits of the project, right? If it is a 10 credit project, it cannot be having a 10,000 word count with a project with 5 credits or 6 credits, but also 10,000 word count. So we must strive a balance between the credit allocated to project and the word count. All right, moving on, will be on some additional notes that we have included in the program standards. Okay, we realize that there is a confusion between Bachelor in Business and Bachelor in Management because of management being a common core and also being a discipline core by itself. So in this case, you can design your program, either Bachelor in Management or Bachelor in Business. You can design it as a common core, a specialist program, or a common program, and you have to mention that very specifically under standard 124 of your MQA01 or MQA02 documentation, right? So you have to mention that very specifically. Okay, for project, now we are opening projects that they are no longer limited to research projects. They could be business plans, they could be anything, so long they demonstrate understanding of the relevant subject area. All right, they could be case studies, they could be anything now. All right, so we try to be more open, we try to be more flexible, that it is not just a quantitative survey or a normal thesis, right, or a dissertation or a project. All right, but again, this is only for masters and doctoral by coursework. Okay, you have the flexibility to define your own program, but again, we must meet all the BOKs. And as mentioned earlier, they could be topics, they could be courses. If you have double specialization, which we mentioned in the program standard itself, if you're offering double specialization, BBA, marketing, and HRM, say for example, you must have 25% of your credits covering marketing and 25% of your credits covering HRM. All right, so that would increase your number of credit hours. But again, if there's overlap between the two disciplines, you can reduce the numbers to the minimum of 120. And SDG, we have been talking about SDGs from the very beginning. Okay, and the very last part here will be a program with the integrated management component. So as we have mentioned earlier, we have sports management, we have architectural management, we have different programs that combine both management and the technical area. So for this, MQA is issuing a circular to different institutions to inform them that if the program has a management component, then 25% of the core component must have courses listed in this program standard. But of course, there's an exception to it if the program is regulated by the professional body. So this is when the professional body's requirements will be prioritized over the program standard. Right, so this is in brief. Okay, moving on the assessment part. Again, the rates were those that were there in the old program standards, whereas the black are the ranges of marks that we see in the existing in the new program standard. So you will see this in detail from page 33 to 35 of the document, along with the suggested modes of assessments. What you see here is that the ranges have been widened, right? We have widened the range so that now we have more flexibility in terms of administering continuous and final assessment. And if you remember, we talked about for coursework, the projects do not necessarily have to be research projects. So if you look at the project component, we have allocated up to 40% under the continuous assessment part. whereby if we have a business plan component, right, we can actually allocate marks to this component. So we are seeing more flexibility here. Okay, as mentioned earlier, requirement for final examination has been removed. We have also suggested some form of assessments there in a documentation as examples for us to follow, where institutions are encouraged to use a variety of methods to measure learning outcomes and competencies. Right. The other important part is you must have a very clear policy on the appointment of external and internal examiners, particularly for your dissertation and thesis at the postgraduate levels. And the composition of examiners must also follow the standards for MDD. Right. So the first change here, we widen the marks, the range of marks. 2, we remove the component of final examination as a final assessment. And number 3, now we require candidates to pass both continuous and final assessments for every course. So here, you can define the meaning of pass. We leave it to you to define the meaning of pass, which implies that the examiner is satisfied that the candidate has met all the CLOs. So that is only our caveat there. That's only our sort of requirement there. It is up to the examiner, and it is up to the examiner to be satisfied that the student has met all the CLOs. Right. We also mentioned in the program standards that you must have a very clear marking guideline, such as your assessment rubric, your marking scheme, and so on, to indicate the achievement of the course learning outcomes. Okay, moving on is a student selection. Okay, if you notice, to ease you to understand this part on student selection, you will see on this slide that those in black and those highlighted in red. Those in black are those existing entry requirements that we still retain in the program standards. Those in red are the added areas into the program standards. So in brief, the entry requirements for certificate, diploma, and bachelor remain the same. But for bachelors, we have included the requirement for those with TVET diplomas. Those with Sijil Kemahiran or Diploma Kemahiran, if they enter into the bachelor's program, what are the additional interventions that the institution must do or must take in order to bridge these students to be able to follow the bachelor's program, right? There is also this requirement which has been around even during the first edition of the program standards, that candidates are required to pass both English and Maths at the SPM level. So this is particularly for Malaysians, right? Malaysians need to pass Maths and English at the SPM level in order to enroll in the bachelor's program, right? This is only for the bachelor's level. So what are the caveats here, right? There are some additional measures that we see here that would help to remedy this situation whereby the candidates do not have a pass in English or Maths. So the first caveat here is that if the candidate enrolling or applying for the bachelor's program has done a certificate or diploma in business with courses in Maths or courses in English. So that is one requirement for waiver. The second requirement is if the Malaysian has undergone previous education, even at the school level, which use English as a medium of instruction, or the candidate has scored a minimum of band 2 in MUET or equivalent. Right? There's also a third requirement or a third caveat here, whereby if a Malaysian doesn't show any of the two of the above, we will have to prepare this candidate for some mathematics and some English courses which are remedial in nature to prepare this student to undergo or to continue with the program, right? And this student should not be allowed to register for any courses that are taught in English. For example, if the student is yet to get a good grasp of English at this remedial level. So this is again to help the student and also to help you, the institutions, to ensure that we alleviate the problem of students not being able to follow the classes and therefore impact on the performance of the course, the performance of the students in the cohort. So we want to avoid this problem as much as possible. So with this measure, we hope it will help you. Right. Okay, moving on will be masters by coursework, by mixed mode, and by research. Again, what we have added here is the requirements for those with related fields, bachelors in related fields. But that do not stop candidates with non-related fields to join the MBA program, right? Or the mixed mode program or the masters by research program, right? So there are basically two requirements here that we have detailed down for masters by coursework and masters by mixed mode. So those with significant research or significant work experience, right? Significant work experience. Okay, we didn't define what is significant experience because we do not want to tie the institutions down. And we also take cognizance of the fact that sometimes someone with 1 year of work experience may have richer experience than those with 10 or 5 or 10 years. So because of that, we didn't want to tie the institution down, but rather we allow you to come up with your own mechanism to carry out an assessment on these students. So you may want to interview them. You may want to ask them to compile a portfolio for you to see, right? Covering areas such as their business experience, covering areas such as their experience, achievement in life, covering areas such as the professional skills that they have developed over the years of work, and also looking at how can they contribute to the class. What are the skills that they can bring to the class? So you can devise a questionnaire with some questions for you to have a more or less understanding of to what extent the student, especially those with non-business related area, to have a good picture or a good grasp of the fundamentals of business, so as to ease this student to follow the program. That is our biggest sort of reason for this move, to allow them to have a more comfortable pathway to obtain a degree. Right? They are, of course, we also mentioned here those without work experience. We could also introduce prerequisite courses covering 5 areas. Right? We mentioned the 5 areas in the program standards, like for instance, courses in managing people, courses in managing financial resources, courses in understanding customers, courses in understanding the environment, and also strategic planning. So we can offer some courses at the undergraduate level. It could be courses where we ask these would-be MBA students to join the undergrad classes, follow the classes, do and pass the assessments as a prerequisite for them to go into the MBA program. Right? Alternatively, some of you may be thinking of offering micro-credentials. So you may take this opportunity to convert some of your UG courses to micro-credentials and offer these courses to your potential MBA students, right? So that you are already preparing them for MBA when they are embarking into the program later on. So this could be one suggestion from us that you can consider. Okay, it is the same for doctoral by coursework, mixed mode, and doctoral by research as well, whereby there is this requirement for degrees in related field. For those in non-related fields, we have also provided the alternative measures that you can follow. Moving on will be the English competency for international students. So we have modified that slightly to reflect a more generic or a broader picture of English requirement. In the past, we used TOEFL, we used IELTS. Now we use CEFR, which has equivalency with TOEFL, IELTS, and other different English language competencies in combination with MOAC, right? So as to give our international students and our local stakeholders a better understanding of the English language requirement. So these will be the requirements to be observed by the international students. Moving on, academic staff. Okay, again, those in black are those that are status quo that we see in the previous and also the existing program standards. Those in red are those we added to the new program standards. You will see here that for certificate and diploma levels, we are now allowing those without a bachelor's degree in business to teach certificate and diploma in business. We are allowing that now, provided that they have significant years of work experience that are relevant to the courses that they are teaching. So this is definitely some good news for us who are running certificate and diploma programs. Okay, for bachelor, the requirements remain status quo for academic staff, except for entrepreneurs. Previously, we said that 7 years. Now we are allowing entrepreneurs with good track records, with at least 5 years of work experience, they can teach bachelor level courses. So especially courses relating to entrepreneurship. So they can do that. All right, for masters, we are now detailing out the different requirements for principal, supervisor, co-supervisor, and teaching staff for masters by coursework, masters by mixed mode, and also masters by research. So they are aligned to the standards for master's and doctoral degree. Right? They are aligned to that document, and this will also give us a very good indication in terms of consistency and also in terms of who do we have, what are the resources that we have, who could become teaching staff, who could become supervisors, and what are the flexibilities we have in terms of appointing industry practitioners as co-supervisors, as well as co-teaching staff for some of our courses. So those are detailed out in page 45 and 46 of the program standard. So this is Masters by Research. You can see the requirements in page 47 of the program standards. And this is Doctoral Degree by Coursework. Again, as mentioned earlier, we have detailed down who can be principals, supervisors, co-supervisors, and teaching staff. You can get the details in page 47 and 48 of the program standards. This is Doctoral Degree by Mixed Mode. You can get additional details in page 49 and 50 of the program standards. And this is Doctoral Degree by Research. You can see this in page 50 and 51 of the program standards for business. Okay, as mentioned earlier, we have already clarified what does it mean by relevant experience. So with that, we hope that will help you to be able to understand how do we calculate, how do we consider cumulative experience. Okay, the other part of it is that we retain the 40 hours per year as continuous professional development programs for our academic staff, right? So that they keep on enriching themselves, which could be very helpful as they deliver the content to their students. Okay, moving on, area 5 on educational resources. Again, these are very generic resources that we see in the program standards for business as well as in many other program standards. What we would stress here is that there must be sufficient resources provided that are conducive enough to support teaching and learning in business. And this would include lecture and tutorial rooms, technical support and facilities. Now, all this must be designed to accommodate student-centered learning. Right now that we are doing a lot of teaching and learning through online, so how do we then ensure that the resources are adequate to support online teaching? And perhaps into the future, when we look at blended teaching and learning, what will be the educational resources that will be enough to support blended teaching and learning? So let us consider all this. Let us look into this, and of course, the panel of assessors will look into this when they come and assess our programs. So this shall serve as a checklist for us to justify the resources that are available to support the programs that we are offering. So perhaps my second last slide. We have also relooked at the program management part. Who can become program leaders? So again, we know it is always a challenge to put in writing what are the criteria, what are the requirements to become a program leader. We know there are 1,001 possibilities, 1,001 conditions of how people can become program leaders. So what we could propose here will be these basic requirements. But what we want the institutions to really look at will be, does the person know ins and outs about the program? Can the person understand and make decisions or resolve issues within the program? That is our bigger concern. So when we consider someone to be a program leader, we are not only looking at, all right, you have a PhD, yes, you can now become the program leader for MBA or even BBA program. If that someone is very new, if that someone doesn't know inside out of the program, and when the panel of assessors asks this program leader, it will give us the impression that the program leader is not prepared to do the job. It's not the right person to do the job, and it will do unjust to the program, to the institution, to the faculty, and to the students. So we want program leaders who are well informed. We want program leaders who are well respected by the peers, who, when suggested something to be done, will be followed by everyone. Someone who has the best interest of the program at heart. So we will need to consider all this, right? Apart from what we see on the screen. What we see is just a general criteria, and I know there are different interpretations arising from this. People ask all sorts of hypothetical questions. Now, before we ask those questions, let's consider what we have just shared with you. Is the person fit enough to be a program leader? Right, looking into areas outside of what we see on the screen. All right. My second last slide is the program monitoring, review, and CQI. So again, these are standards requirement across all the different program standards and the different requirements. So what we want the institutions to be able to do is to continuously review the program. We have a minor review. We also have a major review. So how long or what is the duration for the review to be carried out? What happened during the review? What kind of data that we have collected to support the review? And what kind of improvement that we have introduced to the program? So those are the things that we would like to see, so that 5 years down the road, we see the program changing phase becoming better. We see our graduates becoming better. We also see that we all went through a rich experience curve, right? So we want to see that in the program. And because of that, we need to have a strong IQA, the Internal Quality Assurance Unit. We also need to appoint external advisors on top of the external examiners that we are appointing right now, and seek feedback. Get feedback from different people, from the students, from academic staff, from alumni, from the top management, from professional bodies, even from the community, people around us. Seek feedback from them, and they will be able to inform us why we structure our program in such a way. Right. Of course, in the program standards, we have also mentioned some other things that we should be doing as part of continuous review and CQI. One of which is continual benchmarking. Right. We benchmark programs that are thought of as leaders in that discipline. We link ourselves with professional bodies, with the industry, with government agencies. We participate actively in conferences, seminars, workshops, and so on, either as participants or as speakers. We also organize conferences, seminars, workshops, and also encourage international exchanges. Right. So all these activities will allow us to learn the best practices or even to identify the best programs that we can find from the market, which can be very, very helpful. So my last slide is this pekeliling, this circular from NQA on the use of the current program standard. Of course, we have Cik Zamrin here who will advise us if there's any question later on. But let us bear in mind the dates that we see on this slide, the transition period, as well as looking into the student recruitment following the entry requirements, and also for programs that we intend to apply for provisional accreditation. So if there's any question at all on this, as well as if ada apa-apa persoalan berkaitan dengan dasar, standard dan sebagainya, kita ada Cik Zamrin and also Cik Kamaro Bakri yang sama-sama kita pada petang ni untuk memberi pencerahan kepada kami. So for this, let me end the presentation by thanking all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me. I thank Prof. Lee too for answering many of the questions in the chat box. I believe he has been very busy doing that. So I pass the floor now back to Cik Zamrin, our pengurusi webinar. Terima kasih.
Okay, terima kasih Dr. Eddie atas pembentangan yang saya kira sangat informatif, jelas dan sangat terperinci. Diharapkan semua pihak berkepentingan khususnya pada petang ini dapat mengambil poin-poin penting atau input-input yang berkaitan tentang standard program pengajian bisnes yang terkini. So saya rasa in terms of soalan, so sebahagian soalan di dalam Q&A session pun kita dah jawab sebahagian besar soalan dia. So mohon pihak PPT dapat refer kepada jawab balas daripada sesi tersebut. Dan untuk sesi Q&A seterusnya masih ada lagi persoalan-persoalan yang belum dijawab, dan kita minta sekretariat dapat share lah kot Q&A page tu untuk screen untuk kita minta panel dapat menjawab je lah. Boleh Puan Alwan ni?
Okey, saya share screen Nampak ke?
Ya, belum lagi Puan Alwan ni. Alright, kita nampak program standard accounting.
Okey, sekejap Okey, nampak ke soalan yang saya letak di sini yang answer live this question? Do you see the question?
Tak ada Alwan ni.
Tak nampak Okey, sekejap.
Kemungkinan share screen yang lain.
Okey. Saya cuba lagi sekali. Ini tak nampak. Masih tak nampak ke? Ada? Saya nak cuba share.
Masih tak nampak.
Ya.
Masih tak nampak Alwan ni.
Okey, sekejap saya minta bantuan admin sekejap.
Tapi Prof, sementara itu saya rasa ada kiranya baiknya kalau Prof Lee dapat summarize kot soalan-soalan utama yang Prof Lee dah jawab untuk perkongsian kepada semua PPT lah. Yang Prof Lee sementara kita dapat lihat paparan soalan.
Okay, let me just do a quick summary here. I think that at the moment, a number of HEP is asking about how many PEO should be there in programs. Now, basically for the number of PEO, it depends on the flexibilities given to the HEP. So therefore, whether it's a 5 PO, 4 PO, or 6 PO, it all depends on the vision and missions, okay, for the HEP. And definitely when we prepare the PO, we have to make sure that the PO able to capture the 5 cluster of the learning outcome, which means that the mapping for the 11 MQF learning outcome very, very important here. So therefore, this is a basic guideline. I think that not just one question, a number of questions being raised. Now, also when I answer some questions, also linked to the number of PLOs, because I understand that at the moment, a number of HEP in the markets now are using 11 PLO because 1 PLO to 1 MQF 2.0 skill. So therefore, it's like you have 11 PLO mapped to 11 MQF 2.0 skills here. Now, when you refer to program standards, although the number of the PLO is not 11, as what Dr. Eddie mentioned just now, the number of PLO will go back to the HEP also. We prepare a set of PLO based on our initial discussions, based on the requirement in MQF 2.0. Because if you refer to MQF 2.0, at the back, there's appendix linked to level descriptors. So some of the keywords we use are based on level descriptors itself. So basically, if you look at the PLO perspective here, whether it's 9, 10, 11, as what Dr. Eddie mentioned just now, you want to have more than 11, also can. But it go back to the basic thing would be that after you prepare all your PLO, are they able to be measured or not here? And don't forget, your number of PLO, later you tie down to your CLO. So are you able to do this CLO, PLO mapping? So I think that this will go back to the HEP to decide whether it's lesser than 11 or more than 11, or go back to your courses, go to program level, and then tie back to the PO. Okay, so I think this is another question that has been raised a number of times. So I responded already. Then at the same time, I also observed about some questions actually being posted very early before Dr. Eddie's presentation about entry requirement, about prerequisite courses. Now, if you look at the guideline, actually there is a guideline that prepared by the MQA in terms of how to prepare prerequisite courses. Now, obviously, from the panel perspective will be that we specify 5 areas need to be covered, because these 5 areas are the main area that in the business. Now, whether you need to cover all the 5 areas or not, it all depends on the background for the students, because some students, they may have irrelevant, let me say like this, is like qualification, unrelated qualifications, but they may perform certain type of job responsibility and pick up certain type of skills, or they may have, let's say for example, micro-credential trainings. They learn some form of business knowledge already. So therefore, HEP must decide, okay, now based on the background for the applicants, how many prerequisite courses need to be offered? I think this is something that go back to the flexibility for the HEP itself. Now, whether you want to offer this as one course for one area or one course that cover multiple areas, it all depends on the flexibility in HEP, because at the end, the main thing is very straightforward. We have to make sure that the student apply to you after attending the prerequisite courses, they are ready to do the master's program. As long as you think that they are ready to do the master's program, as long as you set assessment method to make sure that they are ready, then you're okay here. So we don't really specify, because how to run prerequisite will depend on the resources for the institution. Like for example, some of you may want to use your undergraduate courses as the prerequisite courses for the masters. Okay, so therefore you must think, go back to your own resources, that what you have, and then from there you decide how to manage the prerequisite courses. I think this is the flexibility which MQA provide to all the HEP, but I think that sometimes we provide you HEP with very more flexibility. You start to think that we don't give you guidance, but go back to what resource you have first, do a form assessment, and then go back to the drawing boards there to decide what should be the prerequisites and how to actually make sure that students fulfill all the needed requirements here. Okay, I think this is linked to the prerequisite course requirement. And also some HEP asking about assessment being removed, and then ask about the minimum credit requirement for each of the components. As what Dr. Eddie mentioned just now here, all the number that are the minimum credits need to be fulfilled for a given components here. You can introduce more. It go back to how you design your programs to fulfill the learning outcome. For example, if you think that internship is a must for your institution based on your vision and mission for the institution, you can always introduce internship. But we put that 0 here to provide flexibilities. If you think internship is needed, you just introduce that here. So these are another question that been asked. Now, and also there's one HEP asking about I think that linked to specializations. Okay, so therefore the HB asking about how many specialization can we put in here. I think that if you go back to the table that actually explained by Dr. Eddie, if you look at introduce one specialization, the credit almost hit 120s already. So do you want your student now, let's say for example, you want to introduce 2 specialization. Do you want to introduce another 30 credits? So you have a degree with 150 credits. Now you have to think about duration of completions. So therefore, I think that this is the basic thing that we have to think about here. We have the structures to make sure that every student equipped with the basic common core. Then after that, go into the case of specialized knowledge. So why you need more than one area that lead to the case of the completion duration become longer. So that's another question that you've been asked here. Now, there's also a question linked to research methods. Dr. Eddie also discussed subsequently about research methods here. Like for example, how should research methods should be handled in the specialist masters and the top masters program. Now, this will, if you look at MDD, research methodology being specified clearly. But why in the master's program here, we do not really state clearly for research method, because we will allow HEP now to think. Because if you do MBA programs, okay, your MBA program, your student may not want a hardcore research methods. Your MBA student may want the quantitative research methods that are relevant to the business world. So again, we give you flexibility to think about how to design your curriculum here. So these are other questions here. Now, I think these are the basic major concern here for most of the HEP. Let me hand over to Encik Zamrin. Thank you.
Okay, terima kasih Prof. Lee. So since kita tak dapat nak share paparan Q&A, so kita akan bacalah soalan Dr. Eddie
Yep.
Yang masih lagi soalan tidak berjawab lah. Mungkin masing-masing boleh refer dalam Q&A session yang open question yang masih kita tidak terjawab. So ada satu soalan berkaitan dengan under clause 3.3, candidate are required to pass both continuous and final assessment for every course. Some institutions practice combined pass of 50% and above, and we understand that there are a mixture of paper from different faculty which makes up total courses in a program. How do we address the issue that arise from this in compliance with such clause with the added words that HEP can define the meaning of pass? However, a pass should imply that the examiner is satisfied that the candidate has met all the learning outcome of a course. So mungkin Dr. Eddie boleh jawab.
Ya, terima kasih Cik Zamrin. This is, to be honest, a frequent question that we got from different institutions, especially relating to courses that come from different faculties. So for instance, kalau dalam fakulti perniagaan, mungkin ada setengah kursus yang diservis oleh fakulti lain, misal kata fakulti IT dan sebagainya. Jadi dalam kes sebegini, memandangkan program standard kita menyatakan bahawa pelajar perlu lulus kedua-dua continuous and final assessment. Adakah ini terpakai kepada kursus yang diservis kepada fakulti tersebut? So, apa pandangan Cik Zamrin berkaitan dengan perkara ni? Apa pandangan MQA?
Saya rasa pandangan saya lah, mungkin Cik Kamaru boleh betulkan kot. Saya rasa kita hanya mengambil kira program standard utama lah, yang mana program subjek itu ditawarkan lah. Ke macam tu, Cik Kamaru?
Ya, oleh kerana kalau dia ambil daripada program standard business, dia kena mematuhi standard program business lah. Kan? Super case macam kita kata kalau dia ambil daripada minor program yang lain, so dia kena patuh standard program yang tersebut juga. Nah, jadi kita ambil kepada standard program mana yang diambil, so IPT perlu patuh kepada standard program yang berkaitan.
Terima kasih JKB. Jadi maksudnya sekiranya kursus tersebut datang daripada ataupun berasal ataupun tergolong dalam program standard ni, maka dia perlu memastikan program standard ni dipatuhi, manakala sekiranya kursus tu datang daripada katakan fakulti lain ataupun program perakaunan. So for those courses, they need not fulfill this requirement.
Ya, betul
Ya, betul.
Alright. So let me translate it to English, ladies and gentlemen. What we are saying here is that to respond to this question, if the courses or the content come from the Faculty of Business. So this is where this requirement will have to be fulfilled, meaning to say the students must pass both continuous and also the final assessment. If the courses are coming from different faculties, or even let's say courses that are offered by accounting, let's say part of the accounting program, in which that program is subject to the professional bodies requirement. So this is where those courses will need not have this requirement of passing both the components. Okay, the second part of it, how do we define? Again, some institutions define passing as 40, some define passing as 50. So that's why, and some institutions define passing as 60 or 70, roughly. I remember we were discussing about that in some meetings ago. So because of that, we have decided not to put a range there, or not to put a threshold there. We leave it to the institution. How do you define pass? So maybe 40 is a pass to you, maybe 50 is a pass to you. But what we want to see is the student, if let's say you define 40 as pass, and if let's say the course has 60% continuous and 40% final assessment, summative assessment, then the student must score at least 40% of that 60 and 40% of the 40. That is one part of the definition. The second part of the definition is that irregardless of that meeting that minimum 40 or 50%, the student must show that I must have met the minimum required CLO out of me. So that is what we call. So we leave it to the institution to decide. You may want to divide your CLOs in your continuous and your summative assessment. We leave it to you, right? You may want to combine. You may want to test all the CLOs in continuous, all the CLOs in summative assessment as well. But we must have a mechanism here. If CLO1 has 30%, CLO2 has 30%, CLO3 has 40%, how do we ensure that I met 40% of the 30 CLO1, 40% of the 30% in CLO2, and 40% of the 40% in CLO3? Prof. Lee?
Okay, no, continue. I just want to add one point,
Yeah, please.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay. Now, I think that for all the HEP here, when you look at this statement, you must understand that in this statement, there are two types of pass. One is a pass based on a student passed the course. One is a pass, meaning that the student achieved the learning outcomes. Therefore, I think that at the moment, we can see that in this document here, we do not specify that the two pass are exactly the same. It depends on HEP, because some HEP in the market, when they do the attainment for CLO, they're actually using a higher mark, as what Dr. Eddie mentioned just now here, meaning as an achievement of a given LO itself here. So that therefore, the HEP need to sit down now, we think about this. When you do your measurement for LO, how you actually create the mark range to show the attainment for the LO, for each different components. I think that that's very important, whether that your achievement LO mean that it's alignment with the pass grade in your institutions here. Again, this is something that HEP need to decide and come up with a framework to inform MQA when you do your full accreditations, when you do your maintenance audits, because this is what you need to explain to MQA, how you actually measure your LO. I think that's one part there. That's why I said, if you look at this statement here, it's very generic, because why? We don't want to restrict create a statement that mean that every HEP now follow our approach. There's no such thing as follow our approach, because it depends on the practices for the HEP here. So that's one dimension here. Okay. Now, I think another thing that linked to the past here, basically, this linked to another question that which I respond just now. We must understand, if we refer to table 4, when you create table 4, you have your CLO. Your CLO will map to different type assessment. So therefore, if you really define your pass grade, and the pass means achieving the learning outcome carefully. Now, if you're able to get the pass based on learning outcome, you should be able to get the achievement for all the CLO here. Okay, so I think these are mapping are very, very important. Unless it's that you do a wrong mapping, then it means that when your pass doesn't lead to the learning outcome, as what Dr. Eddie mentioned just now here. So this is a process to relook into constructive alignment. If there's a gap, you realign it to make sure all the LO that can be achieved here. Okay, thank you, Dr. Eddie.
Thank you very much, Prof. Lee. We hope to have satisfied your question. Perhaps we will move on to the next question.
Okay, kita move to the next question berkaitan dengan ICSA qualification. Prof. Lee, ada pandangan?
Secretariat. I think just now I responded to I think 2 requests here, because the program standards actually cover very, very broad. ICSA qualification is very narrow. So therefore, I don't think that for secretariat qualification able to be captured under the program standard, because if they want to be part under the program standard, they have to add a lot of additional courses, because it compares between the niche area and the broad area.
Okay. Masih Prof. Prof. Dr. Eddie ada ni pandangan?
Yeah, I mean saya setuju dengan Prof. Lee that we didn't cover company secretariat in this standard. So, but kalau kita membaca dia bersama dengan apa yang ada dalam any other qualification, so that may have implications on the syarat kemasukan, but not on the bidang. On how we have defined this business standard. Again, pardon us, because business is just so wide. It is just so wide, and I think we to be honest, we spent a long time defining business. We were trying to define business in 2014, and in 2019 we were still trying to define business. Meluas sangat, and that's where there's a lot of arguments coming in. What is business? What is not business? And one of the things that we look at was, I know there was one question on, is it wajar for us to cover entrepreneurship under business? You know, what we look at was, we look at what were the offerings by the faculties, apa yang dipunyai oleh faculty, what is owned by the faculties. So on that basis, we also use that to identify, oh, is that a way for us to know if this belongs to the business family? And so on. So we actually look at so many different perspectives. Right? So maybe after this, maybe you, if you can sort of let us learn more from you why secretary or why certain areas should belong to business, we'll be more than happy to consider this in the next revision. Just like technology management, logistics, and supply management, how they became BOK in the latest program standard, which they didn't exist in the last program standard. Yeah. All right. So next question.
Next question daripada Kintat form berkaitan dengan minimum number of academic staff. Yang ini dalam standard program memang kita tetapkan minimum 10 lah for bachelor. Tapi walau bagaimanapun ia tertakluk kepada kelayakan pengajar tersebut lah, dengan subjek yang akan diajar dan juga bilangan pelajar. So lagi banyak tu, lagi ada keperluan tenaga pengajar lah. Okay, mungkin Dr. Eddie nak tambah ke?
Oh, that's very clear, Cik Zamri.
Right.
Very clear.
Okay, seterusnya datang soalan daripada Nur Rashikin binti Ali Hassan. Apakah yang dimaksudkan dengan kredit minimum untuk trust disiplin? Sebagai contoh, Diploma in Entrepreneurship, adakah jumlah kredit minimum dan disiplin keusahawanan mesti 27 kredit? Jika dirujuk dari BOK, hanya terdapat 3 bidang yang terlibat dalam untuk tahap diploma. Mohon pencerahan.
Alright, terima kasih. Ya, terima kasih di atas soalan yang dikemukakan kepada kami. Jadi, alright. Diploma keusahawanan adalah merupakan diploma spesialis atau specialist diploma yang kami takrifkan dalam program standard. Jadi dalam program standard ni, pelajar diploma keusahawanan ni perlu mengambil sekurang-kurangnya 48 kredit daripada Common Core. Jadi daripada 6 area tadi, dia akan ambil khusus daripada Common Core, termasuk HRM, marketing dan sebagainya. Dan apabila sampai 27 ni, jadi student ni perlu ambil 27 kredit ni daripada disiplin core keusahawanan tadi. So dia kena ambil semua khusus lah di bawah keusahawanan tu. Jadi kita kena reka program tu, reka bentuk program tu berdasarkan kepada BOK yang kita lihat dalam disiplin core. terutamanya di bawah keusahawanan. Jadi itulah maksud kami. Akan tetapi sekiranya program tu merupakan diploma, general diploma in business. Kan? Jadi adalah tidak wajar untuk diploma yang berbentuk umum ni untuk seseorang pelajar tu hanya melihat kepada satu-satu bidang sahaja. Sebab itulah kami kata walaupun masih ada 27 kredit, tapi 27 kredit tu perlu disebarkan sekurang-kurangnya dalam 3 bidang. Ini kerana satunya kita nak pelajar tu mempelajari pelbagai bidang dalam bisnes. Jadi ilmu dia tidak terhad kepada satu-satu disiplin, teras disiplin sahaja. Dia ada 3 ataupun lebih teras disiplin. Keduanya, kalau kita gabungkan teras disiplin semua tu, kalau kita biarkan pelajar mengambil daripada satu-satu teras disiplin, nomenclature kita sudah tidak betul. Dia sudah tidak menjadi diploma in business tetapi diploma dalam satu disiplin yang terhad. Sebab itulah kami katakan kalau dia nak jadi specialist diploma, kesemua 27 kredit itu mesti datang daripada bidang tersebut. So that's how we define. Kalau kita lihatkan tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, if we look at the common core and the discipline core kan, the common core are basically general area, fundamental area. So dia tak mengkhusus, dia tak specialize. They don't go in depth into the discipline core. So misal kata HRM. In the common core, the HRM is basically the basic HRM. But when we get into the discipline core, that's where under HRM we will look at all those specialized areas like recruitment and selection, compensation and benefit, global talent outsourcing, management dan sebagainya. So we will start looking at the in-depth detail when we move to the discipline core. So this is how we define a general diploma or bachelor and a specialist diploma or a bachelor. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you Dr. Edi. Untuk soalan berikutnya saya rasa Prof Lee, does it mean pass is not necessarily defined by marks? It seems very vague.
Yeah, this one depend on the answer I respond to the continuous and the final assessment, the pass. Yeah. So we responded earlier already. It's linked to the earlier questions.
Okay. Okay, untuk soalan berikutnya berkaitan dengan thank you for your clear explanation. If the program name is Bachelor of Business, Honors, Accounting and Finance, can we consider accounting course as discipline core? Prof Lee?
Okay. Now, I think that for let me respond this, Dr. Eddie. If anything you want to add on, you can add on, and something also. Now, I think that if you refer to HEP, the first question I would like to ask the HEP like this: when you look at accounting and finance, what is the purpose of doing accounting and finance degree? Basically, you want to map the professional body. You want to get highest possible exemption professional body like ACCA, CIMA, even ICAW. So if your intention is to get the exemptions, which means that this program standard actually will not able to give you enough room to get the maximum exemptions. So that therefore, if that's the case, your accounting and finance design that should follow accounting program standards rather than follow the business side. Because if you refer to business side, the specialization, we only give you 30 credits. Okay, so 30 credit, if your course is 3 credit per course, you only have 10 courses in accounting. So can 10 courses in accounting now deliver your learning outcomes or not? Okay, so I think this question, I go back to your intention of developing such a program and what is the purpose of this program based on the mission and vision for your institutions. And then how you want to create the graduate you like for the markets here. Now, imagine student only study 10 accounting courses. Do you think that they are competent enough to have the skill to become accountants in the future? Okay, so therefore I would say that this is, I'll push this question back to you in terms of curriculum design here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Prof Lee. Okay, untuk soalan seterusnya berkenaan tentang prerequisite when they already enrolled in the program. Saya nak minta Encik Kamarul Bakri.
Yang mana Zamri ni?
Yang can student take prerequisite when they already enrolled in a program without condition offer.
Ya, soalan jam.
Soalan 4:41 PM.
Ya. Boleh can student take prerequisite when they already enrolled in program without conditional offer. Tak clear eh. Prerequisite. Tak berapa clear soalan dia.
Soalan ni rasanya pelajar bertanya prerequisite untuk saya assume lah ini untuk MDD lah, diambil semasa di dalam program.
Oh, dia dah masuk eh. Tapi ini tempoh transisi lah ni.
Maksudnya tempoh transisi
Dia dah masuk dululah. I faham Dr. Eddie, that means student ni dia dah already masuk ke program ni without conditional offer. Basically kalau dia dah masuk ke program ni dan dia di luar daripada tempoh transisi kita, that means dia dah tak perlulah ambil.
Ya. Saya pun mengandaikan yang soalan ni adalah untuk masters dan yang mana memerlukan seseorang pemohon tu mempunyai ijazah dalam bidang berkaitan, dalam bidang bisnes. Buat masa ni, sebagaimana yang Cik Kamaru Bakri katakan tadi, memang dalam tempoh transisi ni kita tidak memerlukan kedua-dua syarat ni untuk dipenuhi, sama ada prerequisite ataupun penilaian rapi, penilaian dalaman yang rapi. Akan tetapi bila standard ni dikuatkuasakan selepas 1 hari bulan Mac 2022, kita akan mengambil kira keperluan ni di mana seseorang pemohon tu yang tidak mempunyai ijazah dalam bidang berkaitan, kita perlu lihat sama ada beliau mempunyai pengalaman kerja yang meluas, yang berkaitan dengan bidang perniagaan. Right? And of course, as we look at that part, kami juga akan kami juga boleh mengambil kira sekiranya katakan engineer, let's say assuming there's engineering graduate, that student did some management courses before masa dia kat university, right? And at the undergrad level. So as an institution, kita sebenarnya boleh ambil kira. See, the main idea is not to penalize these students. The main idea is for them to show that they have the prerequisite knowledge when they come in. You know, again, because we found that a significant number of MBA students out there, they lost because they didn't get the fundamentals of the field. Immediately they got into the higher level business knowledge in terms of analyzing, in terms of applying. So we found that some of them are at loss. So because of that, we wanted to ensure that when they come in, they are ready for the program. So actually, one thing that the institution can do is the rigorous internal assessment. Do the rigorous internal assessment. And this could be looked at from two perspectives. One, from their work experience. Kalau dia jadi manager, dia ada orang, dia pimpin orang bawah dia. So kita bolehlah tanya soalan sama ada beliau ni berapa ramai yang dia urus, apakah pengurusan yang dijalankan, sama ada dia juga buat department punya budget, dia juga mengambil pekerja. So all this will be helpful for us to determine sama ada individu ni dia tahu tak apa yang dia buat, apakah background management yang dia ada. Dia ada tak buat plan perancangan, dia punya strategic plan, dia punya organizational business plan dan sebagainya. So all those will be very helpful. The other part of it, look at the transcript masa dia buat undergrad dulu. Pernah tak dia ambil kursus basic like micro, macro, principles of management, strategic management, entrepreneurship, which are courses that are quite common across many universities and across discipline. Kalau dia pernah ambil kursus-kursus macam ni, we can actually use that as a basic to ask this student, plus your work experience, plus the courses you have taken, are you ready? So that is one mechanism. The other mechanism is, of course, we identify a few undergrad courses. The basic undergrad courses, minta dia masuk those courses for one semester. And of course, assessment is a big part, yeah. So when we ask them to go prerequisite, we must assess these students. So if assessment becomes a requirement, so that's where we have to ensure that the design of the courses fit with what we intend to see out of the students. And that's where, to make things easy, you may want to identify some of your basic courses, your undergrad courses, as courses for this golongan, for this group of people, right? So these are important, because remember, a prerequisite must be fulfilled before these students got into the program, yeah. So let us bear in mind this point before we design our own internal assessment or our own prerequisite courses. Yeah, Prof. Lee, please.
Yeah, Dr. Eddie, let me just add one point here. I think that for all the participants today, Dr. Eddie just now mentioned one of the key points will be working experience. Because if you look at working experience, a person without relevant qualifications or in the field or related field. But if a person have relevant working experience, then if you look at the requirement itself, as what Dr. Eddie mentioned just now, with relevant working experience, we have to go for internal assessment. Now, this is a bit like FLA. So on the other side, you assess the working experience, you make sure the person has the right knowledge to cope with the master's program. So if you look at this process here, it's nothing really different compared to what we do now at the moment here, because we admit students based on FLA. So same thing, a person's that based on experience, we can assess them based on their relevant knowledge to cope with the programs here. So therefore, I think that if you go back to all these requirements now, all these requirements are consistent with MDD, because they are written based on the MDD requirement. But the main intention behind this will be that we are responsible when we recruit every student into our program. We hope that they can survive in the next 1 or 2 years, whether they are full-time students or part-time students, to get the qualifications here. Okay, thank you, Dr. Eddie.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Lee. Okay, untuk soalan berikutnya adalah berkenaan tentang practical training. So,
I think
is it
this one
optional?
is
Sekarang ini memang optional kan?
Yeah, optional.
Okay, alright. Okay, seterusnya soalan berikutnya adalah tentang how can we define whichever higher when comparing between standard and program standard. So basically untuk standard program ni, all the standard is very generic. So program standard adalah lebih narrow dan lebih specific dan detail. So mana yang lebih tinggi, which higher kalau program standard, so maknanya PPT kena patuh kepada program standard lah. So those yang tak ada program standards, so maknanya PPT kena follow standard di dalam standard. Okay, alright. Seterusnya, the pass of continuous and final assessment including master program. Prof. Lee, yes silakan. Untuk soalan assessment.
It depends on the definitions on the past that we answered just now, because it all depends on the assessment strategy for the institutions. Yeah.
Okay. How about agribusiness program in diploma level? There are no agribusiness area in program standard.
Eddie, this one is a 25% rule, right?
Yeah. Thank you for this question. I think we did consider this in one of our earlier discussions, looking at agribusiness, and we also identified that I think we identified that most of the courses are basically business courses. That's what we found out. Correct us if we are wrong. Most of the courses we found are business courses. It's just that the branding of it, the branding of the institution that is running the program, of course, with some agricultural element in the program. If the program follows NEC of the ONEC of 340 and 345, of course, this program standard akan diguna pakai. But if it is of a different NEC, a different code that is more towards pertanian, then the 25% rule applies. So this is where just like technology management, agricultural management, or architectural management, ya, khusus yang mana lebih ke arah that technical side, tapi ada juga elemen management. Jadi kita kena pastikan 25% daripada teras khusus dalam program tersebut mempunyai khusus yang dinyatakan dalam BOK program standard. So that's how we define. I hope to have answered your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you Dr. Edi. Untuk soalan berikutnya daripada Kian Tat Fong. Can we define passing both components by referring to the passing the CLO, say above 60% for the related CLO?
Okay, they are basically two interpretations to this. The first one is what is your overall passing mark? What qualifies, let's say if C is your passing mark, and if C is, let me just illustrate an example. If C is your passing mark, and if C carries a GPA of 2 with a marks of 50, with a minimum marks of 50, right? 50 to 54, or there's this range, but there's a minimum 50. So if let's say you already fixed 50 as your overall passing mark, then now we look at how you structure your continuous and your summative assessments. So let's say you decided that your continuous assessment is going to be 70 and your summative assessment is going to be 30, right? What we are doing now is, so long the student gets 50 from any of these two components, right? The student may already gotten 50 marks for continuous, and the student came for final examination as summative, only scored 2 marks, still the student passed the course, because overall the student is now getting 52 out of 100. That's what many institutions have been doing, right? So what we are trying to define here is, again, back to the two interpretations. The first one is, if it is 50, can I score, do I score 50 from continuous and do I score 50 from final in order to pass the course? You know, we do not want students who already passed the continuous assessment, they either miss the final exam. If there's a gap there that the students need not sit for final exam, they'll just ignore the final exam. If I score 70 already, why should I do more for my final exam, right? Some students may have that thinking, right? So we do not want the students to have that thinking that if they pass one, they can actually forgo the other. So because of that, we say you still need 50-50, if 50 is your passing mark, right? So that is the first interpretation, 50% of the 70%, 50% of the 30%. That's what the student needs to get in order to pass the final examination. So you are right that there will be two different sort of marks in terms of how do we interpret them. A student may got 70 but still fail, just because the student couldn't pass the other component, right? Okay, the other interpretation now is, how do we then demarcate the CLOs according to the assessments, the continuous or the summative assessments? How do we then draw that? So mathematically speaking, if CLO1 has 30%, the CLO2 has 30%, or has CLO3 has 40%. So how do we now ensure that the student now gets 50% for CLO1, 50% of the 30% for CLO2, and 50% of the 40% for CLO3? So now we will have two different interpretations now. And of course, whether it's 40, 50, or 60, we leave it to you, because why? This will have implications on you, on us, when we do the attainment of PLOs later. When we do the calculation, whether we met those PLOs and in what CLOs that contributed to meeting the PLOs, we leave it to you, the mechanism you are having now. Right? So let us bear that in mind. Yeah. So two interpretation, the marks and the CLO.
Okay, terima kasih Dr. Edi. Saya rasa jam kita pun dah melewati jam 5:16 petang. So saya rasa kita akan ambil lagi saya kira 2-3 soalan lagi. Prof, boleh ya?
Boleh.
So, dan soalan-soalan yang tidak jawab, kita akan jawab secara bertulis lah. Maknanya kita akan come up dengan FAQ. So kita akan letak di dalam portal kita lah untuk rujukan semua. So untuk petang ni, so kita akan jawab, kita akan entertain lagi saya rasa 2 atau 3 soalan lah. Okay. Soalan berikutnya adalah berkaitan dengan assessment for those subject to prerequisite. Untuk subjek-subjek prerequisite, kita memang minta subjek prerequisite itu dilaksanakan assessment lah, bukan setakat lecture sahaja. So must do assessment. Okay, dan kena pass ya. Alright, untuk soalan berikutnya, if a MBA program is not offering economic as a module but have some component of it in other related module, is it acceptable? Mungkin Prof Lee ke?
Okay, I think that Dr. Eddie already mentioned a number of times when we refer to BOK, BOK can be captured as a course or in terms of topics. So I think that even if economic is not taught as a course, let's say for example, in a number of universities, they actually teach a subject called understanding business environment. Maybe understand business environment, you cover microeconomics a bit, macroeconomics a bit. As long as you can show that the topic being covered, able to map to the BOK, then you're okay already. So therefore, we have to really, let me unbundle ourselves. Never think that BOK is a course. BOK can be topic. Because if you want to look at the case of integrated approach for your student to learn, you should be able to think into combining different BOK as a course itself here. So I hope I answered the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you Prof Lee. Okay, untuk soalan berikut dia adalah sekejap tentang based on MQF 2.0 and latest program standard, there may be a need to change the current course content. That means we need to resubmit our program for accreditation purpose. When should we do it and when is the deadline? Okay, yang ini berkaitan tentang kalau sebarang perubahan lah kan, sebarang perubahan daripada standard program business. So rasanya dalam kita punya surat perkeliling tentang perubahan kurikulum 2018, kalau di bahagian catatan di bawah, mana-mana pindaan yang berkaitan dengan program standard ataupun any dokumen jaminan kualiti MQA, so maknanya tidak perlu dikemukakan kepada MQA untuk pengesahan. Just PPT perlu rekodkan untuk PPT dan kita akan masuk untuk buat verification semasa audit audit pematuhan lah. Maksudnya tidak perlu submit lah. Maksudnya kalau kita nak submit nanti beribu-ribu program kena submit kepada kita lah. So kita tak ada lah nanti manpower untuk melaksanakan proses verifikasi. Tapi untuk makluman dengan syarat perubahan tersebut tiada perubahan emisi. Ya, sebab program tu misalnya dilakukan sebagai HRM, tiba-tiba berubah kepada yang lain ke, so itu tidak berlaku lah. Kalau berlaku, yang itu kena apply balik lah. So maknanya perubahan tu boleh melebihi 30% disebabkan oleh pematuhan kepada standard yang baru, tetapi tidak menyebabkan perubahan emisi. Okay, alright, itu jelas ya. Okay, seterusnya, is the new entry requirement start with immediate effect? When are the prerequisite course to be implemented? Yang ni saya rasa kita dah jawab tadi kan, Prof? Okay, yang ini kita tak perlu jawab. Okay, yang ini mungkin last question tentang may I kindly request for further explanation on this postgraduate entry requirement for applicant with qualification in related fields. Those without working experience required to take prerequisite units. Understand that we are to refer to page 38 to 41 of business program standard business study. Dr. Eddie atau Prof Lee, soalan terakhir.
Dr. Eddie, pass to you. It's entry requirement. You've been answering for so many times.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. For those without working experience, they are very likely to take prerequisite courses. Now, but again, we use the word very likely because there is also a possibility. Now, first of all, we have to look at the field, right? This is where we may come across people like sports management, technology management. They already have the 25%, right, of courses, or even if it's not 25, it's near to 25% courses in business. We who have done those courses, even engineering, pure engineering, they will have done some courses as well. So unless they really do not have all those courses, this is where we will have to subject them to the prerequisite courses. So Cik Zamrin, kami difahamkan sebelum ni kalau institusi nak bangunkan prerequisite, khusus prerequisite tu, kalau ada apa-apa isu berkaitan dengan khusus prerequisite sewaktu FA dijalankan, MQA mungkin hanya akan kenakan dia sebagai cadangan penambahbaikan, ya. So this is also for we are all experiencing this. Although we know that in many countries, prerequisite courses are quite common. They're quite common in many countries. What we can possibly do is maybe we can benchmark these countries, buat penanda arasan to look at what have they done as far as preparing their MBA candidates is concerned. And let's say if there is any stumbling block or any issue that we are facing, so long our intention is clear to prepare these candidates to become students, even when the panel comes for visit in the future, they will very likely suggest to you what to do to enhance the prerequisite courses rather than making them as conditions for us to follow. Yeah, so let us keep that in mind, but whatever it is, let's do some penanda rasa. Let's do some benchmarking, looking at the different courses. We know that some institutions already prepared their prerequisite courses. We know, of course, we can't share with you, but we know that there are already institutions doing that, and they are doing them in multiple ways. Some of them identified some courses at the undergrad level as the prerequisite courses. So they are already telling their bachelor level students, including the international students, if you plan to do MBA, let's do these few courses whenever you are free during semester break, or you can also follow the other students who are doing these courses in a conventional way, right? Some institutions, they purposely design some prerequisite courses. Yes, we know that some institutions are also thinking of credentializing these courses. So that they make these courses much more flexible. Even when I am back to my home country, or even when I'm on my semester break, I can still go to the learning platform for me to learn about those courses, sit for assessment, perhaps earn some digital badges, and then tender them to the institution or to any other institution for me to enroll myself in the MBA program. So this is something that we can explore. Right, thank you.
Okey, terima kasih Dr. Eddie. Saya kira jawapan tadi itu mengakhiri sesi kita pada petang ini. So pertamanya saya bagi pihak MUK ingin mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih lah, khususnya kepada pembentang kita pada petang ini kerana sudi meluangkan masa untuk berkongsi input-input yang berkaitan tentang semakan semula standard program business, khususnya kepada Dr. Eddie dan Prof. Dr. Lee. So insyaAllah soalan-soalan yang diutarakan oleh PPT kita akan paparkan di dalam ruangan FAQ. So memberikan sedikit masa kepada MKA untuk kita senaraikan semua soalan dan jawapan, dan by the time kita akan paparkan di dalam portal untuk rujukan semua. Saya rasa itu saja daripada MKA. Sekali lagi on behalf of organizer and secretariat, thank you for being with us. From the bottom of our heart, our apology for any shortcoming while we conduct this seminar. So mungkin kita akan berjumpa lagi. Saya akhiri dengan dua rangkap pantun lah sebelum kita tutup sesi webinar kita pada petang ini. Kalau ada jarum yang patah, jangan disimpan di dalam peti. Kalau ada silap dan salah, jangan disimpan di dalam hati. Kalau ada sumur di ladang, boleh kita menumpang mandi. Kalau ada umur yang panjang, boleh kita berjumpa lagi. Okay, thank you for speaker and participant. Stay safe and please join us for our next sessions. Okay, alright, thanks.
Alright, thank you very much. Terima kasih.